Hello, your friendly neighborhood host JT Wheatley here again, back for another episode of the History of Comics podcast, this time part 2 of the history of Image comic books. When we last left off, Image comic books had been founded after breaking off from Marvel with many of its top artists and quickly emerged as one of the top publishers in the American comic book industry in a very short time. However, like anything that with meteoric rises, they're going to have some bumps along the way, and Image was no exception. In 1993 to 1994, Image crossed over with Valiant comic books for Deathmate, an infamous event that only had half the founders working on it, Mark Silvestri, Jim Lee, and Rob Liefeld. Valiant Comics was founded in 1989 by former Marvel editor-in-chief Jim Shooter and businessman Steve Marzowski after a failed attempt to purchase Marvel Comics in 1988, being beat out by Ronald Perlman. If they couldn't own Marvel, they decided to beat them, recruiting many of their artists and writers such as Barry Windsor-Smith and Bob Layden, slowly building a continuity-driven universe that gained the attention of comic book readers with books like X-O Man of War, Bloodshot, and Ninjak. However, by the end of 1992, Shooter left the company due to creative differences, replaced by Bob Layden to become editor-in-chief. For a while, Valiant was steadily growing and giving Marvel and DC real competition until Image emerged and stole the spotlight. Instead of being jealous of the new upstart, Valiant Comics decided to work with them. The plans began back in 1992 when Jim Lee met with Valiant publisher Steve Marzowski. For some, like Silvestri, it was an attempt to keep Marvel and DC at bay, as having two of the larger companies in a crossover outside the big two was sure to draw hype. However, due to the late book, something that continued to plague Image, it failed and was one of the many precursors of the retraction to the direct market. The late releases were so bad, stores instituted a 90-day return policy in comics, meaning a book listed had to come out by that time, or they had to give their money back. Todd McFarlane was especially critical of Deathmate, though he would claiming that he felt that they should stay within Image books, though he also did the Spawn Batman crossover with DC in 1994, while Eric Larson and Jim Valentino did refuse to participate in Deathmate outright. One bit of pride for Image was publishing Jack Kirby's last comic, Phantom Force, whose first issue sold 250,000 copies when released in 1994. Based on an unused Bruce Lee comic book pitch Kirby tried in 1978, the King of Comics managed to provide the pencils for the first two issues before passing away, with Michael Theobald providing the art until the series was ended until issue number 8. Despite the ups and downs in Image, things were still going good, but soon cracks formed when Jim Lee, Ross Portacio, and Rob Liefeld went back to Marvel for Heroes Reborn for $3 million each in 1996. The event was designed to revamp many of Marvel's heroes, from Captain America to Fantastic Four. However, it was quickly panned by readers and, most importantly, their fellow Image creators. Once again, Todd McFarlane was especially incensed as he believed they should focus on their own creator-owned works at Image as opposed to working for the competition. Image had its own problems inside the company as well. One controversy was the comic Tribe by Larry Stroman and Todd Johnson about a superhero team of black heroes, which sold 1 million copies with its first issue at Image, but later was published under their own imprint Axis for issues number 2 and 3 before ending due to financial difficulties. A final issue, number 0, was published by Good Comics. Reportedly, Image delayed payment on the comic, and when they finally got it, Stroman and Johnson used the money to form their own publishing company, Axis. The comic is still fondly remembered, particularly as the highest-selling black comic book in history, both with its characters on the page and creators behind it, and rumors of a revival of adaptations continue to be put up to this day. Other companies also try to replicate Image's success, such as Bravura at Malibu and Legend at Dark Horse, which Todd McFarlane personally dismissed because it was based on writers over artists. Though being an artist himself, he does admit his bias. Both lines were designed to honor creator rights, with Legend even co-founded by Frank Miller and John Byrne. And Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy, even designed the logo. However, Legend would be discontinued in 1998, while Bravura went defunct when Malibu was absorbed into Marvel after being purchased by the company. Back at Image, success was also going to their heads, with Rob Liefeld buying a red Viper, which was promptly wrecked by someone driving a Bad Rock outfit, the most popular character in the Youngblood costume. However, it truly came to a head when the speculation crash brought the contraction to the industry in general, with Image paying too much money to talent it recruited. Some artists were demanding $1 million up front, even as the market was collapsing. Rob Liefeld reportedly commented to a colleague when he was looking out of the window of his office one day, "You see all those cars? I bought all those cars." The money ended up being a big distraction as well. As McFarlane put it, when you go from making $20,000 a year to $300,000 a year, you find yourself too busy spending money over working on your books. The creators also started to squabble with each other and even put their own personal studio logos on the covers next to the Image logo. It came to a head when Liefeld tried to recruit Michael Turner from Top Cow for a run in his miniseries Evangeline. Previously, according to Matt Hawkins, who worked at Liefeld's Extreme Studios, Rob offered to merge Extreme and Top Cow to become bigger than Jim Lee's Wildstorm, who Liefeld was competitive with. Silvestri reported was very polite during the meeting but never intended to go through with it. When that failed, Liefeld and Extreme decided to go after Top Cow's top talent, specifically Michael Turner, David Finch, and Joe Benitez. Mark Silvestri was so upset by this that he had Top Cow leave Image over it, announcing his resignation on June 6, 1996, though he still retained his partnership share. The loss of Mark Silvestri and Top Cow caused a major upheaval at Image, and much of the rumblings were turned toward Rob Liefeld. It wasn't just his attempt to poach talent from fellow Image studios, but also the fact he started his own publishing company, Maximum Press, outside of Image. The rest of the founders felt they should be united under one banner, and they strongly objected to it. Thus, on August 9th, 1996, the Image founders held a meeting with everyone and voted unanimously to oust Rob Liefeld from Image. Rob Liefeld voted no, but by the bylaws, if all the other founders agreed, he could be voted out. However, the bylaws also required that a second vote had to be held at least a week after the first one and must again be unanimous. It was scheduled for September 4th, 1996, but Rob Liefeld didn't show up, instead calling the group to stating that he quit. To this day, Rob Liefeld states he always planned to quit, though Eric Larson counters he was going to be voted out regardless. As Larson put it, he pulled a Nixon, resigning before he could be impeached. Liefeld would later sue Image for $1 million on October 2nd, and Image would countersue in 1997. It was all settled the next year, while Silvestri and Top Cow would later return to Image. However, this would not be one of the darkest days in Image, as soon one of their own would sell out to one of their biggest rivals. Image did have a bit of a revival of success in 1998 with their Cliffhanger line, with J. Scott Campbell's Danger Girls, Roberto Romero's Crimson, and Joe Maduria's Battle Chasers. All three comic books were successful and sparked new interest in Image comics again, but they were all from Jim Lee's Wildstorm studio, and he was about to make a move that shocked the whole company. On August 27, 1998, Jim Lee sold Wildstorm, which also included Porticio's Witworks, which he sold to Wildstorm due to not wanting to get into the business side of comics, to DC. Though Jim Lee would still maintain the editorial control of the line. Whilst Portacio himself would actually return to Marvel and DC after suffering a diabetic coma and recovering. Before the sale, Larry Marder claims Jim Lee lied about it up until 2 weeks before the sale, only for Jim Lee to apologize later when the deal finally went through. What's worse, Wildstorm took over 10 books with them to DC, including the highly successful Cliffhanger books, which brought the Image Central below the 30 books needed to remain profitable. Without Lee, Image found itself scrambling for new talent. It didn't help that post-speculation crash, the days of $100,000 sales were a fleeting memory. Thankfully, Image had established itself in the industry enough to be its own selling point. As the third biggest publisher in the American comic book industry, despite some stiff competition from IDW and Dark Horse, it was a prime place for talent to produce their own creator-owned works, as Image could guarantee excellent placement in distributor catalogs, promotion, and overall exposure. It also helped that Image Central finances were self-containing, relying only on fees from the books. Thus, if a book was late or didn't come out, it was the creator who lost money. Of course, the fact that Image was still a place creators could own the works they created was the main selling point. And it wasn't long before new talent started to show up, like Mike Deodato, Jeff Smith, and Sergio Aragonis, all with a larger push to diversify the Image brand. Of those added, there will be two significant creators that would make a huge name for themselves and also help reshape Image. In 1999, Jim Valentino was made publisher at Image with the aim of broadening the talent. Among those he recruited was Brian Michael Bendis, who previously made a name for himself at Caliber Comics, producing crime comic books like Goldfish and Jinx. In 1996-97, Bendis moved to Image, where he co-created Powers with Mike Oman, along with producing Fire, Sam and Twitch, and Hellspawn. The last two were spin-offs of Todd McFarlane's own Spawn comic book. In addition, his previous crime comic books were published under Valentino's Shadowline studio. Powers became a critical hit, winning numerous Eisner's, Harvey, and Eagle Awards for both Bendis and Mike Oman, and soon becoming a new prestige book for Image. However, Marvel took notice and hired him to help launch the new Ultimate line with Ultimate Spider-Man, though Bendis still planned to maintain his relationship with Image, who still published many of his original books. Things did get dicey with Todd McFarlane, who still held a resentment against Marvel, despite all the people he had problems with now being gone in Marvel. And he fired Bendis from Sam and Twitch, which he planned to continue doing while he was still doing Ultimate Spider-Man. At Marvel, Bendis would become one of its most prominent writers, working on many of his premiere books from The Avengers to Daredevil until November of 2017, when Bendis moved to DC on an exclusive contract, where he's the current Action Comics writer. The other creator of note recruited to Image Comics around the same time was Robert Kirkman, who grew up reading Image comic books as a kid. He began his professional career on the satire comic Battle Pope with artist Tony Moore that was self-published under Funko-Tron label. Kirkman later pitched a Science Dog series to Image with artist Cory Walker, but was instead hired to do the Super Patriot miniseries for Eric Larson. He would later create Tech Jacket with the artist E.J. Sue in 2002, which ran for 6 issues. In 2003, Robert Kirkman created Invincible with Ryan Oatley, about a son of a Superman-like hero who starts to develop his own powers. His other comic, though, would take some convincing. Jim Valentino originally turned down a pitch for a zombie comic Kirkman wanted to do, stating that zombie comics don't sell. However, Kirkman decided in his pitch he would say that the twist would be revealed that the zombies were actually a precursor to an alien invasion, using the zombie apocalypse to set up the Earth to be took over. Valentino liked this twist and approved the book, but when it came out, he told Kirkman he loved the comic, but he didn't see any clues for the alien invasion, at which point Kirkman admitted he lied about it. It was just a zombie book. That comic, of course, was The Walking Dead, and the first issue sold just 7,000 copies, but it grew with each issue. Charlie Adlard would later replace Tony Moore with issue number 7, while Moore continued on as a cover artist for issue 2, issue number 24, along with providing the covers for the numerous trade collections. The comic book became a runaway success, and soon Image was making headlines again. And of course, Hollywood came calling with a TV adaptation that premiered on AMC on October 31st, 2011. The show became an instant hit critically and financially, and it still runs to this day, with a spin-off, Fear the Walking Dead, premiering on AMC on August 13th, 2015, which also still runs. The show not only brought increased attention and sales to the comics, which also led to the adaptation to other media, notably the Telltale video game The Walking Dead that was released in 2012. As for the original comic book, Robert Kirkman recently ended it with issue number 193, and as for that original Alien pitch, it was actually used as a satirical backup story in issue number 75. Naturally, with this kind of success, Marvel came calling on Robert Kirkman as well in 2004, where he worked on numerous titles from Marvel Team-Up to the Irredeemable Ant-Man. However, his relationship with Marvel did become strained when many of these series were canceled due to low sales, though he did get to work with one of his childhood heroes when it was announced that he and Rob Liefeld were going to make a Killraven comic in 2007, though the project was canceled despite 5 issues being crafted. All of this was made mute, though, when Robert Kirkman was made an Image partner on July of 2008, the first new one since its founding, ending his freelance relationship with Marvel, though he did finish his Destroyer miniseries for Marvel in 2009. And he would later, as a result of this, release a video manifesto on YouTube calling on creators to abandon work for hire for their own creator-owned work. This actually put him in conflict with another former Image creator, Brian Michael Bendis, who debated the merits of work for hire over independent work at a convention in 2008. Kirkman argued that creators could make just as much money on their own books, while Bendis stated that many creators needed to work for Marvel and DC to fund their own creator-owned work. Plus, Bendis stated it's a lifelong dream for many creators to work on comics they grew up reading, like Spider-Man and Superman. To date, it's a debate that still rages on, with both sides being right at different times. Kirkman also managed to recruit Rob Liefeld back to publish his original Youngblood comic. Reportedly, Kirkman couldn't stand the knowledge of it being published on another company, and so it was announced that Youngblood #1 with writer Joe Casey would return to Image Comics in July 2007, commemorated with all 7 of the original Image founders appearing on a panel at the 2007 San Diego Comic-Con for the company's 15th anniversary. One hiccup with the company lasting so long did come in 2002 when the 10th anniversary book was planned, which was to consist of 4 original stories from the 4 remaining founders, Todd McFarlane, Jim Valentino, Mark Silvestri, and Eric Larson. However, the book became notoriously late when some of the creators didn't produce their parts on time, which frustrated the creators who completed their segments. Eric Larson had a story finally revealing the origin of Savage Dragon, which he finally published in his own comic book due to the book being so delayed. The book was finally released in 2005, just in time for its 13th anniversary, as the joke would be, and once again reminding readers of the old complaints about Image being so late with its books. Jim Valentino would be replaced as publisher by Eric Larson in 2004, who continued most of Valentino's policies. Larson would hold the job to 2008, choosing to focus more on Savage Dragon, with executive director Eric Stevenson being promoted to the title of publisher, which he still holds this day. Under Stevenson, Image's books had expanded significantly, with most now being outside the original Image studios, while the company won the Best Publisher 3 years in a row from 2013 to 2015 from Diamond Distribution. Today, Image remains one of the top American comic publishers after Marvel and DC, continuing to be a champion for creators' rights and producing a diverse lineup of books. Most of the original founders are still there in one form or another, with Liefeld still producing books in Image from time to time, though he works with Marvel and DC as well. Most recently, the highly acclaimed Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples has found its home there. It is one of several acclaimed creator-owned books at Image, which also includes Fatale by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, Chew by John Layman and Rob Gorey, and Southern Bastards by Jason Aaron and Jason Latour. It's a diverse lineup that has earned numerous accolades over the years, most recently when Marjorie Liu won the Eisner for Best Writer on her book Monsters in July of 2018, becoming the first female writer to do so. Most importantly is the impact that Image has had on the American comic book industry that remains. After decades of fighting, comic book creators now have a home that allows them to completely own and control their work. In 2019, Image Books received 30 Eisner nominations across the board and became the first to sweep the Best New Book category, with all 6 titles nominated, Bitter Root, Crowded, Gideon Falls, Isola, Maneaters, and Skybound being Image Books. While not all artists are accepted, as Image maintains standards to avoid the late books of the past, it remains a beacon for independent rights, and being the 3rd biggest American publisher, that is saying something. I would like to thank not one, but 2 sources I used for these episodes. The first is Image Comics, The Road to Independence by George Corey, an oral history of the company's first 15 years featuring interviews with nearly all the founders and others involved. A great read for Image comic fans, though hard to find now. I had to buy it used through Amazon. The other source was the documentary The Image Revolution, which can currently be viewed on Amazon Prime and is a must-watch for any Image fan. And now is September 4th, 2025, time for the favorite comic of the week. Absolute Superman, number 11 by Jason Aaron and Carmine Domecchio. I apologize for scrambling that name. But this is another great issue that finds Superman captured by Brainiac, who's trying to experiment and brainwash him to become the son of the demon, the era Ra's al Ghul. But Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen might have a thing or two to say about that. This is a great series, and once again, the highlight of what makes the Absolute line so great is that this is like a grittier, more darker take on Superman, but it still has a nice hopefulness to it because the way Superman fights back is like he kind of inspires others to stand up for themselves and fight for him and for themselves in a great way that reminds you, like, yeah, this may be a pretty dark book, but they still have that core Superman you just love so much. And Domecchio's art is gorgeous, has a really gritty, realistic feel to it, but also has a nice bit of hopefulness too, and it really shows the power of Superman when he starts to let loose. And also, his Brainiac is really creepy. This is like one of the creepiest Brainiacs ever, and a great take on the character. And all in all, this is just another prime example of the Absolute universe from DC is the best thing they've done in years. Great read, definitely pick it up. And with that, we will conclude with this archive edition of the history of Image Comics. Join me again next week. We're going to be continuing with the theme of Image Comics with the archive editions. But until then, go out and pick yourself up a good comic book. And definitely check out Absolute Superman, basically the Absolute line in general. Seriously, it's the best thing DC's done in a very long time.